Hi, and welcome back to Talks and Tales. I'm excited for this one this week. Today, we're tackling a big question. Is the motorcycle industry dying? Sales are down, and the average rider age is rising, and younger people aren't getting into biking the way they used to. But is it really the end of the road, or is something else going on? We'll look at what's really happening in the UK biker scene, why younger riders aren't joining us in the same numbers, what manufacturers are doing wrong, and why the future might not look as bleak as we all are made out to believe. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these numbers then. Because whenever I've attended some of these motorcycle shows, all I ever hear is, "Oh, no one's buying motorbikes." It's generally an older generation that are into motorbikes nowadays. And when you look at first glance, you think, "Oh my god, yeah, maybe the motorcycle industry is dying." But let's take a good look at these numbers then. So, in early 2025, UK number sales were reported significantly lower than the same period in 2024. Declines in many segments such as adventures, customs, nakeds, and superbikes. Overall sales were down roughly 17 to 25% year on year at mid 2025 compared to 2024 figures. Another report noted that the motorcycle registrations for August 2025 were down 11.5% compared with the same month last year. So there is a reasonable drop. Across the first months of 2025, overall motorcycles remained well below 2024 year-to-date totals, with some reports showing market down by around 20 to 30% compared with the previous year. In some individual months early in the year, total registrations fell sharply. For example, a period that saw around 3,215 bikes registered versus 4,794 bikes the previous year, a drop of over 30% in that specific month. This doesn't seem to be just a UK problem, just by having a quick glance at these numbers. So, across Europe, five largest bike markets: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. Total registrations were down just over 7% for the first 9 months of 2025, compared with the same period in 2024. The UK itself showed a decline of around 4% in that block. So there does seem to be a steady and in some cases quite significant decline in the motorbiking industry. The one thing I find quite interesting about these figures, though, is they seem to be focusing just on new bike sales. I'd be quite interested to find out how that compares with used bike sales. We might not be able to get those figures as readily as we can for new bikes. So there's a bit of a statement here from Visor Down. Motorcycle dealers and industry voices have warned the sector is being overlooked amidst broader economic concerns, including policy focus on cars and EVs, rising insurance and running costs, and limited government support compared to other transport sectors. And then we've got another company saying some dealerships have struggled financially or closed in recent years, reflecting pressures in the industry. This isn't always quantified in national sales figures, but is a real indicator of stress in the retail market. I think what's quite interesting here is that so far that these figures are mainly focusing on the new bike market. So it'd be really interesting to know, because I'll be honest, I've never bought a brand spanking new bike from a dealership. I've always bought second-hand bikes. So yeah, that's quite interesting, that. But it's interesting as well that it seems to be affecting most of Europe as well as. I mean, I'm sure most people have been to France and Spain. My God, the amount of bikes there is unreal. I always get very envious, not very often, of mopeds, especially when you're in France or in Spain. Think, oh, I'd love to buy a little moped just to do my little weekly shops and bomb around and avoid all the traffic. But I think, yeah, I don't think it's ever going to happen, is it? You never know. You never know. Hey, we might end up going on an electric moped just to zip us around. So just a really quick one as well. It looks like I've had a little bit of a deep dive into some of this data, and some months later in 2025 showed smaller year-on-year declines on near parity with previous years, indicating that the market may actually be stabilizing rather than collapsing. And then having a quick look here as well, used motorcycle sales have shown activity and even growth in some periods, suggesting demand may still exist even if the new bike purchases are down, an angle we should probably explore. So I think we've established there that new bike sales seem to be down, not just in UK but in Europe as well, and it would appear that the used motorbike market is either level and in some areas a bit of growth. So why? Why uh, why are why are new bikes um, not being purchased, and why is second-hand bikes being purchased? And I think this boils down to numerous things, and I'm sure it is affected by numerous things. But when I was at the Motorcycle Live show, I got talking to a gentleman at Move Motorcycles. Forgive me because I can't remember the guy's name, but we got talking for a little bit about motorbikes and our history and why we ended up riding motorbikes and some of our mishaps um, and we just got talking, and there was a brand new BMW 1000 RR, and it was a beautiful bike. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the weird um, the aero wings on the side. The tight Yorkshireman in me always thinks that actually that's probably going to cost me a pretty penny if I drop it just on the at a petrol station. But putting that to one side, we kind of stood there and we looked at it together, and we're like, is the motorcycle industry got it wrong? I don't know. Like, some of those bikes are in excess of 200 horsepower. They're full of electronics, anti-wheelie, ABS. It's just full of electrics, and we got talking about how is that ruining the fun of motorbikes? Because I always think that the fun comes from learning your craft. It comes from riding in different conditions and having to adapt how you ride in those conditions. I mean, I remember a good number of years ago I had a Yamaha R1 in blue, beautiful bike, and that was an older bike, and that was one of the original, what do they call them, widow makers, I think they called them. I think because of a really bad statistic that when they first came out, I think they ended up killing quite a few people. But either way, putting that to one side, it was a beautiful bike. It didn't have ABS. It didn't have anti-wheelie. And that thing was so fun, but dangerous, all in the same regard. And in all fairness, it was probably too much for the road. And even that had 150 horsepower, you know. But I remember joining the motorway once, and it was a bit greasy, a bit wet, and I was in second gear, and I applied the throttle, not too aggressively, but with a bit of vigor, shall we say, and the rear wheel slipped, and I could feel it spinning as I'm trying to join the motorway. And I remember slowly rolling the throttle off, and then reapplying to make sure that I got traction again. But you wouldn't get that feel from these new bikes. And I do wonder if actually is it a combination of the fact that we are generally an aging clientele for motorbikes, and people of my generation and older generations don't always want a bike that will do over 200, has over 200 horsepower, because it's just, one, not manageable, two, not fun. I mean, yeah, sure, you could take it on a track, but the average person, I would imagine, wants to do Sunday rides and do longer rides with friends and other people. So, are manufacturers missing a trick? are we focusing, or are they giving us the wrong type of bikes? And is that why the second-hand market is, in some areas, blooming? Because people are buying older bikes that don't have as many electronics on them, and they provide just as much fun with, say, 100 horsepower rather than 200 or 300 horsepower. Maybe that's the case. I think the other area as well to talk about and maybe mull over is, do we have fewer younger riders doing their CBT and coming into the motorbike community? And I think that's a really, really tricky question. And maybe we should get someone on the show that can tell us if they are experiencing lower volumes of people turning up to their CBTs and doing them. But from my experience and from what I've witnessed, I don't think there is a reduction in younger people riding motorbikes. I think the problem we've got is that there appears to be a younger audience either choosing to ride cheap electric kind of off-road bikes. We can argue whether they're legal or illegal. Or you do tend to seem to find a lot of younger riders that unfortunately have either bought a cheap bike and just decide not to insure it, not to tax it, and use it that way. Or unfortunately, as we've all been more than aware, that the motorbike industry, especially in the UK, motorcycle theft, burglary, crime is absolutely through the roof. I remember when I first started riding, I wouldn't even bat an eyelid of leaving my motorbike outside Tesco's while I go inside to go do my weekly shop. Now, I daren't do it. I just daren't. I know when I did the Spine of the Dragon the last year, and that was in October, November time, and I'd booked a Premier Inn, and I thought to myself, where am I going to park the bike? Now currently ride a Yamaha MT-09 Tracer on a 2016. So it's not a Ducati. It's not a bike that's instantly recognizable and probably high on priority of theft. But still, they are easy targets. And I think it boils down to the fact that sometimes there's no consequences for people's actions. And so many times, especially in Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, I've seen stolen motorbikes with individuals wearing balaclavas on, flying past police in cars, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. And maybe that's the reason why brand new bikes aren't being bought. Why go and buy a 15 grand, 10 grand bike, brand spanking new? Take it to your local shop. You come back out, it's gone. Yeah, absolutely gone. And you're not gonna be able to get that back. You're just gonna get a crime number and got told, "See you later, thank you very much." And maybe that is the case. Maybe that's the reason why people aren't buying brand spanking bikes, and maybe that's the reason why people are buying cheaper second-hand bikes, because if you go and blow 10 grand on a brand new bike and it goes, then you're devastated. You know what I mean? If you blow a couple of £1,000 on a bike, yeah, you're still really, really knocked off. But there's a reasonable chance you may not end up in a financial crisis because you're still paying £10,000 worth of bike off. So maybe that is the reason. Maybe it's a combination of multiple things. Maybe it's a combination of increasing average age of motorbike riders. Maybe it's the inaccessibility of younger riders to get into the industry or get on a bike at a reasonable cost and buy a bike at a reasonable cost and insure the bike at a reasonable cost. And then maybe it's a case of actually what we need to be doing is preventing bike crime, because maybe then it will allow people to feel that their bikes are going to be safer when they're out and about, leaving them at the side of the road while they go into the local cafe. Maybe that's part of the reason. So, how are we going to save the industry? How are we going to make sure that it lasts for generations to come? I think fundamentally it starts really with two things. I think it starts with trying to entice younger riders into the industry. At the end of the day, younger riders don't want to be sold to; they want to be part of something, and I think that's where this community beyond the bends will help with that. Bringing newer members into the community into beyond the bends, and then trying to help them out with telling some of the stories and some of the routes and making it interesting for them to be part of. I think there has to be something done about affordability for buying smaller CC bikes. I think there has to be done has to have to do something around the cost of getting your license. I mean, the government's not really helped there. If they're getting your full license, they've made it a hell of a lot more difficult. Um, so yeah, I mean, not really much we could do with that, but I'll try and speak to a few of the local training schools and try and get some prices, and we'll share some of them on Beyond the Bends. So if you guys know anyone that's looking and getting into motorbikes, just get them to give Beyond the Bends a like and follow, and I'll try and feed some some content there for new riders as well as some of our more seasoned veterans. But I think the industry is changing. I think it's changing as in a whole. I think not just myself, but I think there's a lot of female riders actually, a lot of female riders and male riders, but there seems to be an increase in female riders that are creating their own communities, their own moto kind of vlogs, and creating their own riding communities, and I think that's amazing. I think that's the only way we're going to get some of these younger riders into the industry as well. But I do think though that manufacturers have got to step up their game. They've got to step up the game because for two reasons. If they want to maintain the older, the more seasoned motorcyclists, and they want them to buy these brand new bikes, then they've got to make them secure. They've got to find a way to make them secure and less 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 appealing to thieves, because no one is going to part with their hard-earned money if there is a really good chance that the bike's going to get stolen. They're just not going to do it, and that's probably why we're seeing the second-hand market just slightly pick up a little bit. But we can't just put that blame on manufacturers, because, like I said before, there has to be consequences for people's actions, and I do think that we need to maybe change the way that we are that the policing is happening. There needs to be more people around. There needs to be consequences for people stealing motorbikes. You know, you can't walk down the street now without either someone flying past you on a motorbike with a balaclava on, or, in all fairness, CCTV. It's bloody everywhere. And the amount of times people pass CCTV to the police and nothing happens, it's just mind blowing. But look, we are where we are. So I think a bit of reflection time. I think if bikes disappeared tomorrow, we wouldn't really just lose the machines, would we? We'd lose the feeling of the open road in front of us, the way the helmet quietens as we stick it on our head. The community meetups, the cafes, the petrol station chit chats. Riding is more than a product. It's an identity. It's a way of life. It's a freedom that we've all absolutely loved and enjoyed. So I think what's really important is to tell our stories to younger members of the community, pass on some tips and tricks so they don't make the same mistakes that we do, and engage in communities. It doesn't have to be just to be on the bends, but please do engage in beyond the bends. Um, I think that's the only way that we grow it, and we bring that community to a younger audience as well. So next week we're going to be diving into rider stories, first bikes, big mistakes. I've collected a few cracking ones from beyond the Benz community. If you want yours featured, just give us a quick message, and I'll have a good look through it. And you never know, we might even try and get one or two of you on. If not, I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, keep it shiny side up, guys.